Marcus Chen stood in the center of the crystalline arena, his human frame dwarfed by the towering alien spectators that filled the massive stadium. The Zephyrian combat pit stretched 300 meters in diameter, its translucent walls pulsing with bioluminescent veins that responded to the crowd's excitement. Above him, thousands of beings from across the galaxy roared their approval, their varied forms creating a kaleidoscope of colors and sounds that would have overwhelmed most species. The betting pools had closed an hour ago. Marcus knew the odds without looking at the holographic displays that floated around the arena's perimeter. 1,000 to 1 against him. The lowest odds in the tournament's 500-year history. His opponent emerged from the opposite gate with earth-shaking steps. Krextar the Unbreakable stood 4 meters tall, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming like polished obsidian under the arena's artificial suns. Each of his 6 arms ended in razor-sharp claws that had torn through reinforced battle armor in previous fights. His reputation preceded him across 17 star systems, 47 victories, 0 defeats. 3 species had gone extinct trying to produce a warrior capable of matching him. The crowd's noise reached a deafening crescendo as Krextar raised all 6 arms, flexing muscles that could crush starship hulls. Bioluminescent scars covered his torso, each one a trophy from a fallen opponent. His mandibles clicked in what Marcus had learned was the Zephyrian equivalent of laughter. "Another soft flesh comes to feed my legend," Krextar's voice boomed across the arena, translated instantly by the universal communicators embedded in the walls. "Tell me, tiny creature, did your species draw lots to decide who would die today?" Marcus remained silent, his breathing steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He wore simple black combat gear, standard issue from Earth's colonial marines. No powered armor, no energy weapons, no technological enhancements of any kind. The tournament rules prohibited such advantages, though most species had natural abilities that rendered such restrictions meaningless. High above in the luxury viewing boxes, Ambassador Thyra watched with barely concealed disgust. The Galactic Council representative had made her opinion clear during the preliminary negotiations. Humanity's request for membership was a joke. They were a young species, barely past their first interstellar conflicts, with no remarkable physical or mental capabilities. Their insistence on participating in the trial of worthiness was seen as either desperate posturing or suicidal stupidity. "This is embarrassing," Thyra muttered to her aide, a serpentine slith whose scales shifted colors with emotion. "The humans should have remained in their little corner of the galaxy. This spectacle will only reinforce their reputation as a primitive species with delusions of grandeur." The Slythe's scales flickered yellow with amusement. Perhaps they genuinely believe their warrior has a chance. Their psychological profiles suggest an unusual tendency toward irrational optimism. In the arena below, the ceremonial weapons were presented. Each fighter could choose from an array of traditional implements, forged from materials that could withstand the enormous forces about to be unleashed. Krextar selected a war maul that weighed nearly as much as Marcus himself, its head crackling with contained energy. Marcus approached the weapon rack slowly, his eyes scanning the available options. Plasma blades hummed with deadly promise. Gravitational hammers could alter local space-time. Neural whips could paralyze opponents through quantum entanglement. He passed them all by, instead selecting what appeared to be the simplest weapon available, a straight sword with a plain steel blade. The crowd's noise shifted from excitement to confused murmuring. Several species' translation systems struggled to convey the appropriate terms for bewilderment. Even the arena's automated systems seemed to hesitate, running verification scans to ensure Marcus hadn't made an error in his selection. Krextar's mandibles clicked faster, his amusement growing. "You mock me with this choice, human. That blade cannot even scratch my carapace." "We'll see," Marcus replied quietly, testing the sword's weight and balance. The weapon felt familiar in his hands, like an extension of his own body. He had trained with similar blades for 20 years, though his opponents had never known that fact. The arena's central hologram materialized, displaying the face of the tournament's AI overseer. Its features shifted constantly, representing the collective wisdom of a dozen ancient civilizations. Combatants, you understand the rules. This is a fight to submission or incapacitation. Killing is permitted, but not required. The victor earns the right to continue in the tournament. The defeated may forfeit their species' claim to advancement within the Galactic Council. Are you prepared? Both fighters nodded. Then let the 137th trial of worthiness commence. The hologram vanished, and a profound silence fell over the arena. In that moment of stillness, Marcus felt the weight of his species' future pressing down on him. Humanity's colonies were struggling. Their expansion had been blocked by 3 separate alien powers who viewed them as an aggressive, unpredictable threat. Earth needed the resources and protection that Council membership would provide, but they also needed respect. Krextar moved first, his massive form surprisingly quick despite its bulk. The war maul swept through the air with enough force to shatter mountains, aimed directly at Marcus's torso. Most opponents would have attempted to dodge or block such an attack. Marcus did neither. Instead, he stepped forward. The movement was subtle, precise, and completely unexpected. Marcus slipped inside Krextar's guard, his smaller size becoming an advantage as the massive weapon passed harmlessly over his head. His sword moved in a silver arc, the plain steel blade finding the microscopic gap between 2 sections of chitin armor near Krextar's left shoulder joint. The crowd gasped as purple blood sprayed across the arena floor. Krextar bellowed in pain and rage, spinning with all 6 arms extended in a desperate attempt to catch his opponent. But Marcus was no longer there, having rolled away with fluid grace before the counterattack could land. For the first time in his career, Krextar had been wounded in the opening exchange. High above, Ambassador Thyra leaned forward in her seat, her expression shifting from boredom to surprise. What was that? How did he move so quickly? The slith's scales had turned a deep purple, indicating shock. I'm reviewing the sensor data now. The human's reflexes are operating at approximately 3 times baseline for his species. But that's impossible without technological enhancement, and our scans confirmed he's completely unaugmented. In the arena, Krextar was reassessing his opponent with new eyes. The wound on his shoulder was shallow but precise, targeting nerve clusters that most species didn't even know existed. This human had studied Zephyrian anatomy. More than that, he had trained specifically to exploit their weaknesses. Clever, soft flesh, Krextar admitted, hefting his war maul with renewed respect. But tricks will only carry you so far. I have fought beings far stronger and faster than you. Marcus said nothing, simply adjusting his stance. His breathing remained controlled, his heart rate steady. The first exchange had been a test, both of his opponent's capabilities and his own preparation. Now, the real fight would begin. Krextar attacked again, this time with calculated fury rather than casual confidence. His war maul carved through the air in a complex pattern designed to eliminate escape routes. Each swing could have pulverized a battle tank, yet Marcus flowed between them like water, his movements economical and precise. The human's strategy became clear to the more experienced spectators. He wasn't trying to match Krextar's strength or speed. Instead, he was using the alien's own mass and momentum against him, creating openings that shouldn't have existed. When Krextar committed to a powerful downward strike, Marcus was there to redirect the energy with subtle deflections. When the alien tried to grapple, the human slipped away like smoke. Each exchange drew more blood, never fatal wounds, but precise cuts that accumulated damage over time. Krextar's regenerative abilities were legendary, but even they couldn't keep pace with the methodical destruction Marcus was inflicting. "This is impossible," Thyra whispered, her composure finally cracking. "Humans are supposed to be a warrior species, yes, but crude ones, brutal and direct. This level of tactical sophistication suggests—" "Suggests what, Ambassador?" the Slith prompted. "Suggests we've been catastrophically wrong about their capabilities." The crowd's mood had shifted from bloodthirsty excitement to stunned silence. This wasn't the massacre they had expected. The human was not just surviving against Krextar the Unbreakable. He was winning. Marcus felt the familiar clarity that came during combat, his mind operating with crystalline focus. Every movement was deliberate, every breath calculated. He had studied footage of Krextar's previous fights for months, analyzing the aliens' patterns and weaknesses. More importantly, he had trained against opponents who possessed similar advantages, learning to overcome superior strength through superior technique. The galaxy had made a critical error in their assessment of humanity. They had judged his species based on their wars against each other, brutal conflicts where technological advantages often determined victory. But humans had been fighting with swords and spears for thousands of years before they ever reached the stars. That knowledge, that deeply ingrained understanding of personal combat, hadn't been forgotten. Krextar lunged forward with all 6 arms extended, attempting to overwhelm Marcus through sheer aggression. It was a mistake born of frustration and growing desperation. Marcus sidestepped the clumsy attack and struck 3 times in rapid succession, his blade finding joints and nerve clusters with surgical precision. The alien stumbled, purple blood flowing more freely now. For the first time in his career, doubt crept into Krextar's mind. This small, supposedly primitive creature was systematically dismantling him piece by piece. The arena fell completely silent as Marcus stepped back, giving his opponent space to recover. It was a gesture of respect that stunned the watching crowd. In their experience, warriors pressed every advantage until their enemies were destroyed. Mercy was seen as weakness. Marcus knew better. Respect earned through strength was far more valuable than victory earned through brutality. "You fight with honor, human," Krextar said, his voice carrying newfound respect. "I begin to understand why your species has survived so long in such a hostile galaxy." "We endure because we adapt," Marcus replied, "and because we never fight the same battle twice." As he spoke, Marcus was already analyzing his opponent's new stance, the way Krextar favored his wounded shoulder, the slight hesitation in his movements. The fight was far from over, but the psychological victory was complete. Krextar the Unbreakable had been broken, not in body, but in spirit. The real test was just beginning. The silence in the arena stretched like a taut wire, broken only by the soft drip of purple blood hitting the crystalline floor. Krextar stood hunched over his war maul, 6 arms trembling with exhaustion and pain. The wounds Marcus had inflicted were beginning to take their toll, disrupting the alien's nervous system in ways that his regenerative abilities couldn't quickly compensate for. In the luxury viewing boxes, a heated discussion was taking place among the council representatives. Ambassador Thyra found herself surrounded by beings whose previous certainty about humanity's place in the galaxy was rapidly crumbling. "This changes everything," declared High Arbiter Zix, a crystalline entity whose thoughts manifested as shifting patterns of light within his translucent body. "If this human defeats Krextar, we'll need to completely reevaluate humanity's threat assessment." The Quantum Collective's representative, a swirling mass of sentient energy contained within a mechanical shell, pulsed with agitation. "The implications are disturbing. We've been monitoring their military capabilities for decades. Their ships are adequate, their weapons conventional, their tactics straightforward. Yet this individual demonstrates combat prowess that rivals our most advanced warriors." Thyra's aide, the Slith whose scales had been cycling through colors of confusion and alarm, raised a valid point. "Perhaps this Marcus Chen is an anomaly. A single exceptional individual doesn't necessarily represent his entire species' capabilities. That's what we told ourselves about their diplomats, Thyra muttered, remembering the surprisingly effective negotiations that had secured humanity's right to attempt the trial of worthiness. And their explorers, and their traders. At what point do we admit that we've consistently underestimated them? Below in the arena, Marcus was studying his opponent's changed posture. Krextar was adapting faster than expected, compensating for his injuries by shifting his weight distribution and altering his attack patterns. The alien's intelligence was considerable, and his experience in the arena spanned decades. This fight was far from decided. "You are not what we expected, human," Krextar said, his mandibles clicking in what Marcus now recognized as contemplation rather than amusement. "My information suggested your species relies on primitive aggression and technological advantages. You fight like the ancient masters of the Zephyrian blade arts." Marcus allowed himself a small smile. "My people have always been students of war. We learn from everyone we encounter." It was true, though the full scope of humanity's learning was something the galaxy didn't yet understand. While alien civilizations had grown comfortable with their established military doctrines, humans had studied every conflict, every fighting style, every tactical innovation they could find. Earth's military academies didn't just teach human warfare, they taught everything. Krextar straightened, decision crystallizing in his compound eyes. "Then let me teach you something new." The alien's war maul began to glow with internal energy, its crystalline core activating systems that had remained dormant throughout the fight. The weapon's weight shifted, gravitational fields warping around its head to create a zone of crushing force. When Krextar swung it now, the maul wouldn't just strike with physical force, it would drag everything in its vicinity toward the impact point. Marcus felt the pull immediately, his feet sliding across the arena floor despite his attempts to maintain position. This was why Krextar had earned his reputation. The alien wasn't just physically powerful, he was tactically sophisticated enough to reserve his most dangerous techniques for moments when they would be most effective. The first gravitational strike came faster than expected, the maul's altered physics making it appear to accelerate mid-swing. Marcus threw himself sideways, barely avoiding the crushing blow that left a crater in the arena floor. The secondary gravitational wave caught him anyway, sending him tumbling across the crystalline surface. The crowd erupted in renewed excitement. This was the Krextar they knew, the unstoppable force who had dominated the tournament for years. Several alien spectators began revising their bets, though the odds had already shifted dramatically from their original 1,000-to-1 spread. Marcus rolled to his feet, his sword still firmly in his grip. The gravitational fields were a complication he hadn't fully anticipated, though he'd suspected Krextar possessed abilities beyond what the alien had displayed in recorded fights. Most species held back their most dangerous techniques until absolutely necessary. Humans did the same. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, centering himself in a way that would have looked like meditation to casual observers. In reality, he was accessing training that went deeper than muscle memory, older than conscious thought. His instructors on Earth had taught him that every human carried the genetic memory of 1,000,000 generations of survivors, warriors who had faced impossible odds and found ways to prevail. When he opened his eyes, something had changed. His movements became more fluid, more instinctive. He wasn't just thinking about the fight anymore, he was feeling it, responding to threats before they fully manifested. Krextar launched another gravitational strike, but this time Marcus was ready. Instead of fighting the pull, he used it, allowing the gravitational field to accelerate his approach while angling his body to slip past the maul's crushing arc. His sword found another gap in the alien's armor, this one deeper than before. The alien bellowed in pain and surprise. The gravitational fields flickered and died as Krextar's concentration wavered. Purple blood flowed more freely now, and the alien's movements were becoming noticeably slower. Impossible, whispered High Arbiter Zix, his crystalline form flashing with rapid patterns that indicated severe distress. The human anticipated the gravitational manipulation. No species learns to counter our advanced techniques so quickly. The Quantum Collective's representative was running rapid calculations, probability matrices shifting like storm clouds within its mechanical shell. The statistical likelihood of this outcome approaches zero. Either we're witnessing the most improbable combat performance in recorded history, or we've fundamentally misunderstood something about human capabilities. Ambassador Thyra was beginning to suspect the latter. She activated her private communication channel, sending encrypted messages to her intelligence contacts across the galaxy. If humanity possessed hidden depths that their assessments had missed, the Council needed to know immediately. In the arena, Krextar was fighting with desperate fury now. His war maul carved through the air in increasingly complex patterns, each swing backed by centuries of combat experience. But Marcus flowed between the attacks like water, his counterstrikes precise and devastating. The human strategy was becoming clear to those with the knowledge to recognize it. He wasn't just winning through superior technique. He was dismantling his opponent systematically, targeting specific nerve clusters and joint connections that would gradually reduce Krextar's effectiveness while avoiding the alien's most dangerous capabilities. "He's not fighting to win quickly," observed the Slith aide, his scales now displaying patterns of grudging respect. "He's fighting to win permanently. Each wound is calculated to have maximum long-term impact." Thyra nodded grimly. "It's a level of tactical sophistication that suggests extensive study of Zephyrian anatomy. The question is how they obtained such detailed information." The answer, though none of them knew it, was both simpler and more concerning than they imagined. Humanity's intelligence services didn't need to steal alien secrets. They simply observed, learned, and adapted with a speed that other species found incomprehensible. What took most civilizations decades to master, humans could accomplish in years through focused study and relentless practice. Krextar stumbled, his left legs failing to support his weight properly. The cumulative damage was reaching critical levels, and his regenerative abilities were being overwhelmed by the precision of Marcus's attacks. For the first time in his career, the Unbreakable was considering the possibility of defeat. "You fight like my ancestors," the alien admitted, respect evident in his voice despite the pain. "Before we became civilized, before we learned to rely on technology over skill. How does such a young species possess such ancient wisdom?" Marcus paused, recognizing the question as more than casual conversation. There was genuine curiosity there, and perhaps an opportunity for understanding that went beyond the immediate conflict. "Because we never forgot where we came from," he replied, keeping his guard up but allowing a moment for dialogue. "Every human child learns the stories of how we survived on a death world, how we outlasted predators stronger and faster than ourselves through cunning and persistence. Those lessons don't become obsolete just because we reach the stars." The arena had grown quiet again, thousands of alien spectators straining to hear this unexpected exchange. Many were learning more about humanity in these few minutes than their intelligence services had discovered in decades of observation. Krextar shifted his weight, testing his wounded legs. The damage was severe but not crippling. He could continue fighting, though his chances of victory were diminishing with each passing moment. "Your species intrigues me, human. Perhaps there is more to discuss when this battle ends." "I hope so," Marcus replied sincerely. "The galaxy is large enough for all of us." The alien's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. "Spoken like a diplomat, but first, we finish what we started." Krextar raised his war maul one final time, energy crackling around its head as he prepared to unleash everything he had left. This would be his last great attack, the culmination of decades of combat experience focused into a single, decisive moment. Marcus recognized the signs and prepared his own response. The fight that had begun as a test of strength was about to become something else entirely, a demonstration of what humanity could accomplish when pushed to their limits. The outcome would reshape the galaxy's understanding of Earth's children forever. The war maul in Krextar's hands began to resonate with a deep, thrumming sound that made the arena's crystalline structure vibrate in sympathy. Energy cascaded along its length in spiraling patterns, each pulse drawing power from the alien's own life force. This was the technique that had ended his last 12 fights, a devastating attack that would either claim victory or leave him too drained to continue. Marcus felt the change in the arena's atmosphere immediately. The air itself seemed to thicken, charged with potential energy that made his skin prickle. He had never faced anything quite like this, but his training had prepared him for the unexpected. Human martial arts weren't just about physical technique. They were about adaptation, about finding solutions when none seemed to exist. High above, the council representatives watched with fascination and growing alarm. Even Ambassador Thyra, who had entered this tournament convinced of humanity's mediocrity, found herself leaning forward in anticipation. "Energy readings are off the scale," reported the Slith aide, his scales cycling through rapid patterns of excitement and concern. "Krextar is channeling enough power to level a city block." High Arbiter Zix's crystalline form pulsed with urgent light patterns. "If the human somehow survives this attack, we'll need to completely restructure our threat assessments for his entire species. The implications for galactic security could be profound." The Quantum Collective's representative was running continuous calculations, probability matrices shifting so rapidly they created a stroboscopic effect within its mechanical housing. Survival probability for the human, approaching 0. Victory probability, statistically negligible, and yet what? Thyra demanded. The human's biometric readings remain stable. No elevated stress markers, no panic responses. Either he's accepted his impending defeat with remarkable composure, or he knows something we don't. In the arena, Krextar had entered a combat trance, his compound eyes glowing with the same energy that coursed through his weapon. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. "This technique has never failed me, human. It channels the fury of my ancestors, the combined rage of every warrior who died defending our homeworld from extinction. You have fought well, but some forces cannot be overcome through skill alone." Marcus nodded respectfully, understanding the significance of what his opponent was preparing to unleash. This wasn't just an attack. It was a piece of living history, a technique passed down through generations of Zephyrian warriors. To face it was both an honor and a death sentence. But humans had their own history, their own ancestral knowledge that ran deeper than conscious memory. As Krextar prepared his final assault, Marcus reached into that well of inherited wisdom, accessing techniques that his species had developed not in training halls or academies, but in the desperate struggles for survival that had defined their early evolution. The change was subtle at first, barely noticeable to the watching crowd. Marcus's breathing shifted, becoming deeper and more rhythmic. His stance altered slightly, weight distributing differently across his frame. Most importantly, his eyes took on a quality that veteran warriors across the galaxy would have recognized, the look of someone who had stopped thinking and started becoming. Krextar launched his attack with a roar that shook the arena's foundations. The war maul carved through the air, trailing streams of energy, its gravitational field warped into a cone of destruction that would crush everything in its path. The attack was faster than light itself, space-time distorting around the weapon's head to ensure that dodging would be impossible. Marcus didn't try to dodge. Instead, he moved forward, directly into the path of the attack. To the watching crowd, it appeared to be suicide, a final gesture of defiance from a warrior who knew he was beaten. But those with deeper understanding of combat dynamics saw something else, a technique so dangerous and precise that most species had forgotten it ever existed. As the war maul descended toward him, Marcus twisted his body in a movement that seemed to violate the laws of physics. The energy field that should have crushed him passed through the space where he had been milliseconds before, while his sword traced a path that brought it into contact with the weapon's handle just below the energy-charged head. The impact was precise beyond measure, striking the exact resonance point that would disrupt the maul's energy matrix. For a moment that lasted eternity, the two weapons were locked together, immense forces balanced on the edge of a blade. Then Krextar's war maul exploded. The detonation sent shockwaves through the arena, emergency shields activating automatically to protect the spectators from the released energy. When the light faded and the dust settled, both combatants were still standing, though their positions had dramatically changed. Krextar knelt in the center of a glass crater, his weapon reduced to twisted metal fragments scattered around him. Burns covered his carapace where the energy feedback had overwhelmed his natural defenses. But he was alive, conscious, and looking at his opponent with something approaching awe. Marcus stood at the crater's edge, his sword intact but glowing with residual energy. His simple combat gear was scorched but functional, and while he swayed slightly from exhaustion, his eyes remained clear and focused. The arena fell into stunned silence. In 500 years of tournament history, no one had ever destroyed Krextar's weapon. The very concept seemed impossible, like defeating gravity through willpower alone. "By the ancient codes," Krextar whispered, his voice carrying clearly in the silence. "You didn't just deflect my attack. You turned it against itself. How does a young species possess such knowledge?" Marcus walked slowly into the crater, his movements careful but steady. When he reached Krextar, he extended his hand in a gesture of assistance that transcended species barriers. "Because every species that survives long enough eventually learns the same truth," he said, his voice carrying a wisdom that seemed older than his apparent years. "The strongest attacks often contain the seeds of their own destruction. You just have to know where to look." Krextar stared at the offered hand for a long moment before accepting it, allowing the human to help him to his feet. The gesture sparked murmurs throughout the crowd, most of whom had never seen such respect shown between combatants. High Arbiter Zix's crystalline form was flashing so rapidly with light patterns that his thoughts were becoming incoherent. "This is unprecedented. The human not only survived, but demonstrated combat knowledge that predates most galactic civilizations. How is this possible?" Ambassador Thyra was already activating emergency communication protocols, sending urgent reports to Council headquarters across the galaxy. "We've been operating under fundamentally flawed assumptions about human capabilities. If this individual is representative of his species' potential, then we've potentially been preparing for the wrong kind of first contact," the Quantum Collective's representative concluded, its calculations painting increasingly dramatic scenarios. A species with this level of inherent combat sophistication, combined with their technological adaptability and expansionist tendencies, represents either an enormous threat or an invaluable ally. In the arena, the formal conclusion of the match was taking place. The tournament's AI overseer materialized, its shifting features cycling through expressions of confusion and recalibration. The 137th Trial of Worthiness has concluded with the victory of Marcus Chen, representative of humanity. Krextar the Unbreakable has been defeated for the first time in his career, though his honor remains intact. Do both combatants accept this outcome? "I accept," Krextar said immediately, his voice carrying none of the bitterness that usually accompanied defeat. "The human fought with honor and skill that exceeded my expectations. His victory is well earned." Marcus nodded his acknowledgement, though his attention was focused on his defeated opponent. Krextar fought with the fury of his ancestors and the wisdom of experience. I was honored to face him. The crowd erupted in cheers, though the nature of their celebration was different from what anyone had expected. Instead of bloodthirsty approval for a spectacular defeat, there was genuine appreciation for what they had witnessed. Two warriors pushing each other to heights neither could have reached alone. As the medical teams entered to tend to Krextar's injuries, the alien warrior caught Marcus's arm with one of his uninjured hands. "This fight will be remembered for generations," he said quietly. "But more than that, it will be studied. My people will want to understand how you accomplished what you did." Marcus smiled. "I'd be happy to share what I know. But I think you'll find that the real lesson isn't about specific techniques. It's about never stopping learning, never becoming so confident in your abilities that you forget there's always someone out there who knows something you don't." As they were escorted from the arena floor, neither combatant was aware of the frantic communications taking place in the luxury boxes above. The fight that had begun as a simple test of humanity's worthiness had become something far more significant. The moment when the galaxy realized that Earth's children were not the primitive newcomers they had appeared to be, but representatives of a species whose potential remained largely unknown. The real consequences of Marcus's victory were just beginning to unfold, and they would reshape interstellar politics in ways that no one could yet imagine. The medical bay beneath the arena hummed with activity as Zephyrian healers worked to repair Krextar's injuries. Advanced regeneration chambers bathed his wounds in healing light, while neural reconstructors carefully repaired the damage to his nervous system. Despite the severity of his injuries, the alien warrior remained conscious and alert, his compound eyes tracking Marcus's every movement. The human sat in a simple chair nearby, receiving his own medical attention from a small, floating diagnostic drone. Unlike his opponent, Marcus had suffered only minor cuts and bruises, though the energy discharge from the destroyed war mall had left him with some interesting radiation signatures that the medical staff found puzzling. "Your cellular structure is unlike anything in our databases," observed the chief medical officer, a graceful being whose crystalline body refracted light into beautiful patterns. "The radiation should have caused significant damage, yet your tissue is already beginning to adapt and heal. How is this possible?" Marcus shrugged, unwilling to elaborate on humanity's unusual resistance to environmental hazards. It was another secret his species had chosen not to reveal during their initial contact with galactic civilization. Earth had been a harsh teacher, and her children had learned to survive in conditions that would kill most other sapient species. "We're tougher than we look," he said simply. Krextar's mandibles clicked in what Marcus now recognized as amusement. "Tougher, yes, but also smarter than anyone suspected. That technique you used to destroy my weapon, where did you learn it?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that extended far beyond mere curiosity. Marcus understood that his answer would likely be transmitted to intelligence agencies across the galaxy within hours. "My great-grandfather taught it to me," he said finally. "He learned it from his grandfather, who learned it from his. The knowledge goes back to the early days on Earth, when humans fought with whatever weapons they could make, and survival depended on understanding exactly how those weapons could fail. It was the truth, though not the complete truth." The technique Marcus had used was indeed ancient, dating back to humanity's pre-technological period, but it had been refined and perfected in the decades since first contact, studied by Earth's finest military minds, and adapted for use against advanced alien technologies. High Arbiter Zix materialized in the medical bay, his crystalline form still flashing with rapid thought patterns. Behind him came Ambassador Thyra and several other council representatives, their expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed alarm. "Warrior Chen," Zix began, his voice carrying the weight of official authority. Your performance today has raised questions that extend far beyond this tournament. The Council requires clarification on several matters. Marcus stood respectfully, though his hand remained close to where his sword had been before the medical staff confiscated it for decontamination. Old habits died hard. I'm happy to answer any questions I can, High Arbiter. Excellent. First, the combat techniques you displayed suggest extensive study of Zephyrian anatomy and fighting styles. How did your species acquire such detailed knowledge? Marcus had been expecting this question. Through observation and analysis of publicly available tournament footage, humans have always been good at pattern recognition. It was another partial truth. Human intelligence services had indeed studied every available recording of galactic combat sports, but they had also conducted extensive covert observations of alien military training exercises and analyzed captured equipment from border skirmishes. The full scope of their intelligence-gathering efforts would have alarmed the Council considerably. Ambassador Thyra stepped forward, her expression skeptical. Pattern recognition alone cannot account for the level of precision we witnessed. You targeted nerve clusters that most galactic physicians would struggle to locate, even with advanced scanning equipment. Humans have been studying anatomy for thousands of years, Marcus replied calmly. We've learned that most sapient species share certain fundamental structural similarities, regardless of their evolutionary origins. Pressure points, nerve clusters, joint weaknesses, they tend to appear in predictable locations. The Quantum Collective's representative pulsed with agitated energy. Are you suggesting that your species has developed universal principles for targeting biological vulnerabilities? I'm saying that everything alive has weaknesses. Humans have always been good at finding them. The implications of this statement sent ripples of concern through the assembled representatives. A species that could quickly identify and exploit the vulnerabilities of any opponent represented a significant shift in the galactic balance of power. Krextar spoke from his regeneration chamber, his voice carrying clearly despite the medical equipment surrounding him. The human speaks truth, but not complete truth. His knowledge runs deeper than simple observation suggests. All eyes turned to the wounded alien, who continued despite the obvious pain. I have studied the combat recordings from today's fight. The human's movements show training in multiple alien fighting disciplines, techniques that are not publicly known. His people have been learning from us for longer than they admit. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Marcus felt the weight of multiple gazes, each representing civilizations that suddenly viewed humanity in a very different light. Is this accurate? High Arbiter Zix asked, his light patterns shifting to urgent orange frequencies. Marcus considered his options carefully. Lying would be discovered eventually, and the truth would come out in far more damaging ways. But complete honesty might trigger a military response that Earth wasn't prepared to handle. Humans are naturally curious about the capabilities of our neighbors, he said finally. We study what we can observe, and we learn from every interaction. If that makes us seem more dangerous than you expected, perhaps you should ask yourselves why you never bothered to learn anything about us in return. The accusation struck home with uncomfortable accuracy. The galactic community had indeed dismissed humanity as a minor threat, worthy of observation, but not serious study. Their intelligence files on Earth contained detailed information about human technology and military capabilities, but virtually nothing about their culture, psychology, or potential for adaptation. Ambassador Thyra's expression shifted from suspicion to something approaching respect. You're right. We've been arrogant in our assumptions. But that raises an even more concerning question. If we've underestimated your species so dramatically, what else don't we know about your capabilities? Marcus smiled, though there was no humor in the expression. That's something you'll have to discover through diplomacy rather than speculation. Humans prefer to reveal our capabilities gradually, as trust is earned. The statement was both a threat and an invitation, clearly understood by everyone present. Humanity was willing to share their secrets with allies, but they were equally prepared to keep those secrets from potential enemies. Krextar's regeneration chamber powered down with a soft chime, indicating that his treatment was complete. The alien warrior emerged slowly, testing his repaired limbs with careful movements. "The Council faces a choice," he said, addressing the assembled representatives. "They can continue to view humanity as a primitive threat to be contained, or they can recognize them as potential allies with capabilities that complement our own. I know which choice wisdom demands." High Arbiter Zix's crystalline form pulsed with rapid calculations. "The tournament must continue. There are still 7 rounds remaining, and other species await their opportunity to prove their worthiness. But this situation requires immediate consultation with the full council." "Of course," Marcus agreed. "But I hope the council will remember that humans didn't seek this confrontation. We simply responded to the challenge that was placed before us." As the representatives filed out of the medical bay, each lost in their own thoughts about the implications of what they had witnessed, Krextar approached Marcus one final time. "You fought with honor today, human. But more than that, you fought with wisdom. That is a rare combination in any species." Marcus bowed respectfully. "Thank you, Krextar. I hope we have the opportunity to continue our conversation under more peaceful circumstances." The alien's mandibles clicked with genuine amusement. "I suspect we will have many such opportunities in the years to come. Today's fight has changed more than tournament standings. It has changed the galaxy's perception of your people forever." As Marcus was escorted to his quarters to prepare for the next round of the tournament, he reflected on the truth of Krextar's words. The fight had indeed changed everything. Humanity's careful plans for gradual integration into galactic society had been shattered by a single combat that had revealed far more about their capabilities than Earth's leadership had intended. But perhaps that was for the best. The galaxy had underestimated humanity's strength, and that underestimation had led to conflicts that could have been avoided through mutual respect and understanding. Now, at least, future negotiations would be conducted between equals. The tournament would continue, and Marcus would face new challenges in the rounds to come. But the most important battle had already been won. Humanity had claimed its place among the stars not through technological superiority or military conquest, but through the simple demonstration that they were worthy of respect. In the depths of space, emergency communications carried news of the day's events to every corner of the galaxy. Military planners revised threat assessments, diplomats reconsidered negotiation strategies, and intelligence services began the massive task of gathering accurate information about a species they had foolishly ignored. Marcus Chen had entered the arena as humanity's representative in a simple trial of combat. He would leave it as the catalyst for a new age of interstellar relations, one built on the recognition that strength came in many forms, and that wisdom lay not in underestimating one's neighbors, but in understanding that the galaxy was vast enough for all who had the courage to claim their place among the stars.